Welcome to Sit Down News. I'm going to talk to you tonight about a blog that I posted today called Ultimate Gangster. That's in reference to someone that I always held close to my heart and was a dear friend of mine, Johnny Santori. John was a guy that was very low key, but those who knew him knew he was a serious guy. He was a capable guy and very dangerous guy. But those people who were close to him and who he let get close to him knew that John had a big heart and he was 100% for you and 100% had your back. John came from Brooklyn. As I posted in the blog, he had a rough upbringing. He lost his father at a very young age, and that was only followed by losing his mother, who passed away while he was holding her. She died in his arms. And he was just as tough as he was as big as like a teddy bear he was. I remember one time going to on Linden Boulevard, going to the old TSS store, and it was Christmas time because John wanted to get angel hair that you put on the Christmas tree. And he drove us crazy. And we were running around the stores looking for this angel hair, and we finally found it. And he was so happy. And I remember questioning him. I said, John, you're such a tough guy. What's with the angel hair? And he turned around and he said, Christmas reminds me of my parents. And I felt stupid for even saying something like that. But he was a great guy. He was very good to me as a kid growing up. And while I was away, he was extremely good to my son and my oldest daughter. And he really took care of those kids and he loved those kids and they loved him. So John, like I said, John grew up in Brooklyn and hung out in East New York, and a lot of guys knew him. He actually stood around a guy named Red Chetty, and I'm unsure of who exactly Red Chetty was, or I don't think he was a friend, but if he was, someone comment below and let me know about Red. Like I said, I don't like talking about things I don't know about. So, but I know he was very close to Red Chetty, but he eventually becomes associated to Ciro Perone with the West Side. But we'll get to that in the story. So there was a story that happened, and John was running around. He was running around wild, and he was supposed to go to school, but John didn't want to go to school. John wanted his education was in the street, as I said, and he did get that education very well. Like I said, he was a very capable guy, and that was his life. John was a gangster, and anybody that knows this about him knows I'm telling the truth. And there was a story that, like I said, I believe it was in the White Horse Bar off Jamaica Avenue in Queens. And John was about 17 years old at the time. And he was hanging out in the bar. And these two guys came in and they flashed badges and they were pretending to be cops. And they grabbed him and the whole bar was watching, and they brought him outside and threw him in the back seat. Obviously, they didn't handcuff him. But the people in the bar obviously thought that they were law enforcement. The guys were not fooling John, because John knew that he had gotten into some problems, and John was obviously carrying a pistol, and these guys didn't know that. And so as the story goes, and I heard this next part from John, although let me just state that John never admitted to doing anything except for his smile that he gave me when he told me what he told me. And so as the story goes, he skips whatever happened that they took, that where they took him. But he tells me, he says, after they took me, he says, about a week later, I finally go back into the bar. And one of the guys in the bar says, Johnny, we were worried about you. We heard that those two guys that came in here and grabbed you that day, that they found them both slumped over in their car. They were both shot. They both got killed. And John said he just shrugged and said, no, I'm all right. They let me go. I know John killed them. John wasn't going to admit that he killed them because that's the type of guy he was. But I know what John did. Just the way he smiled, I knew what he did. And he was a young guy at 17, but he was protecting himself, thought he was protecting himself. And he said, obviously, they were looking to do something to him. They just didn't handcuff him. They didn't handcuff him. And I don't think they ever expected that he had a gun on him. And so that's just one of the stories with John. There's many that I'll get into in part two. Um, the the other thing was that he he really did give good advice. And one of the things I said was, he always said, keep your fucking mouth closed. He didn't want nobody talking about nothing. And he really wanted me to stay out of trouble. And it wasn't like when there was trouble, he came running with a pistol. He would give me wrong a lot. If I got into trouble, he was used to get mad at me. If I had a pistol, he wanted to take it away from me. And one time, a friend of mine had a 25 automatic, and he told the kid, he says, you know what would happen if you shot me with that? You get me mad, because it was a small caliber gun. And that's just was his mentality. He was a tough guy through and through. And John was a bank robber. He loved to rob and steal and make money. And as I mentioned in the blog again, he had told me that what he would do, he would be, going to different areas, and for whatever reason, sometimes he would end up in Pennsylvania. And while he was there, he would pass banks. And some of these banks, he said, would either have one, like an old security guard, or no security at all. And he would start casing them banks, and he would start sticking these banks up, and he would rob. As a matter of fact, at one time they called him like the gentle bandit or something like that, because there was women in the bank, and the women were getting shaken. They were all upset. And he went over to them and said, look, I'm not here to hurt nobody. I'm just here to get the money and leave. And, that's what he did. And his aunt would say that she would be cleaning and go in his room and, go to put laundry away. And she would open up his drawers and, go to move his shirt out of the way. And he had the whole, bottom of the drawers lined with stacks of money. And she questioned him one time, and he had told her, look, just take what you need. He didn't want to tell her where he got it from, but obviously she knew that he was up to no good. And that's just the way that John was. I'm going to talk more about his little crew that he ran around with. That's going to be in part two of the blog. It's just too long for me to write the whole thing, and I just wanted to break it up. And the other thing is that I speak about when I first met John. I was 14 years old, and my mother was working as a secretary in a company. The guys that were involved in the company were Louis Dedone. These a bunch of guys were there, but Louis was there a lot. Louis wound up in the future, from then, becoming the acting boss of the Lucchese crime family, and Louis is now in prison. There was a lot of guys that used to come. Ray Argentina, he's another friend with the Lucchese's, and all guys from different crews. And they used to hang out at this place, at this business. And what the business was about, we used to get the luggage that would come late or get lost on a flight. So if you were flying and your luggage don't make it on that flight, and now you want to go to your hotel room, the airport would make sure that the luggage, either the next day or later that night, be delivered to wherever you are, whether you're going home or to your airport, to your hotel room. And that's where this company got involved. And I was 14, and I used to drive a van for this company. And I used to go to work with my mother. I had a little dog. I used to take the dog to work, a little puppy, Labrador Retriever named Bandit. And I would take the dog to work. And one day when I went to the office, these two guys are sitting there, and one of them happens to be John. I didn't know them, and they were there to talking with Louis Dedone and a bunch of other guys that were there. And you could see he was a rough guy, and they all respected John. And he was definitely rough around the edges. He had just I think he was only out a couple of days. He was with one of his friends named Lenny. I don't know Lenny's last name. There's a picture of him in the blog. And the funny thing is that the dog was running around, and he like kind of yelled at me. He says, "Why don't you go take that dog for a walk before that dog pisses and shits all over the place?" He didn't want the dog was going near him. He didn't want the dog pissing and shitting near him. And he was just like a rough guy. And in the blog I say, I ended it with, I went outside, I grabbed the dog and I went outside and I was like, who the hell is this guy? And I'll explain a lot more about John. But like I said, he had such a good heart. As dangerous as he really loved us. Like, he loved me and my kids. And he was very good to us. And there's so many funny stories that took place. And I didn't want to cram it all into one and lose it. So I wanted to break it up. I could try to do it in two parts. It may be three or maybe longer. And the one thing that I could say about John is that, he taught me a lot, and he was a no nonsense guy, and there was no, um, it was black and white with him. There was no gray area with John. You were either right or you were wrong. And like I said, a lot of times he would give me wrong, and tell me you're stupid. That was a stupid move. And what's the matter? Even like getting a nice car, he was against that. And I remember I had gotten a Lincoln Town car because everybody, that's the car that was the kind of car that you wanted to be in. And I was trying to show off, and I wanted to be in this car. And he had told me, he said, "You never should have got that car. You bring attention to yourself." Right. And I was too stupid and young to realize what he was talking about. And he said, "But you see my car," and he had an older Peugeot, whatever, however you say it. And it was an older car. It was, it was a nice looking car, but it was an older car. And my car, of course, was newer than his. And he said, "Empty your pockets. Let me see how much money you got in your pockets." I don't know what I had. Maybe I had $80 at that time. I was just starting to drive. And he says, "Come here." And he took me to the back of his car and opened up the trunk. And he lifted up I don't know if it was a blanket or whatever it was, and there were stacks of money. He must have just did something. He was always doing scores. John, that's how John made his money. And he would kid around me. He would say, "When I run out of money, I just go in the drawer, I take another stack out." And he was like a real throwback, and the way he spoke and everything about John just screamed tough guy, and that's what he was. That's why I said ultimate gangster. I mean, to me, he was one of the toughest, most dangerous guys that I ever met. And I'll get to a story about John, what John Gotti said about John, how he felt about John. And that'll come on later on. But he was respected by everyone. I'm not going to use the word feared. I don't know who feared him and who didn't, but John was respected by everyone in that life. And it destroyed me when he wound up dying. And I'll get to that in whatever part I end at. That's the end. And I I was contemplating, do I write about John? Do I not write about John? I'm sure if he was alive, he would kick me in my ass. He wouldn't want me to. He wouldn't want me to obviously write anything about him. But John has passed on, and I'm trying to do him justice by at least telling it the way it was and giving a little stories behind what kind of guy he was. And there's one that just blows me away that I'm sure that everyone will enjoy, and it's really a big lesson, and it says a lot about his character of just how he was and how true blue he was. And so with that, I'm going to head to bed. I just wanted to go over it a little briefly and give a little more background. I hope everybody has a good night. If you haven't seen and looked at Sit Down News. It's on sitdownnews.com. You could read the blog post about the Ultimate Gangster. That's about John. That's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Ciao.